I wouldn't make that connection as a direct result of PRT. The merging of the different peace officer security units, protective units within the province, specifically to highways, scan, conservation officers, CSOs with the Capital Commission, is more so in relation to aligning those types of job duties and peace officer, special constable duties under a ministry that that understands that connection with what they do in the field, and then making sure those interoperability benefits are gained through not only the internal collective group getting together as one team, but also in having that relationship built in the field with RCMP officers and municipal police officers.
Right, because not all of these, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like I remember asking one year some questions about the highway traffic officers, and that couldn't be answered because it was a Ministry of Highways matter. So is that ensuring that all of these policing type bodies will be under corrections and policing now?
Right, and that incident that you're reporting to wasn't, again, the catalyst, but it was one of the things that caused some concern.
Fair enough.
I'd like to, thanks, Joe, have Rob speak to aspects of what you're referring to.
Sure.
I think might bring some clarity.
Rob Cameron, Assistant Deputy Minister, Policing, obviously. So I think some of the things I'd like to share with regards to the PPS is one of the advantages that we will see in the long term is the ability to leverage the resources in a more efficient and effective manner. So one of the things that we've noticed over different events that have occurred over time now is that when all of these provincial peace officer entities are separated, there's always a difficulty of coordinating all the efforts into one sort of everybody rowing in the same direction. So the advantage of PPS, one of the advantages of this is that we have that coordinated, consistent management process, command structure. So when we do have situations where we need to leverage resources for whatever that may be, whatever kind of situation, it could be increasing patrols in certain areas because there's a hot spotting, there's a surge in crime, for example. Or it could be an emergent situation or something that has occurred. It could be everything from a crime type of urgency, or it could be a natural disaster, for example. We have the ability to leverage all those resources more effectively. The other part of that is by having PPS and inside of a ministry that is actually a law enforcement ministry, has that experience, has that knowledge. Obviously, we have a pretty good depth of experience in that type of world, is the ability to enhance and improve the development of the officers, the training levels, the skill sets. As Dale mentioned earlier, if you go back into the early days of PRT, we saw that the PRT members required some additional training to get up to a certain level. Some of those things that we saw them take on were the what I call IARD, which is an immediate rapid a response to active shooters and things like that. In addition to that, we saw training for as I think Dale mentioned, also domestic violence and responses to those kind of things. So if we look now at PPS members and the level of training they receive, for example, conservation officers are highly trained. They go through a post-secondary training. They go through their own academy. They come out with a training level that is on par with policing, or at least I like to say it. It's a police officer and a conservation officer. Their training levels are very, very similar. With the police, or with the highway patrol, sorry, there was a requirement to bring them up to a certain level, and now they go to the police college and they get this training, and so that is the professional development of this particular entity, and it becomes more effective because it can do more. Bringing all those entities together, as I said before, we can leverage them, we can use them in more emergent situations, but we can also share those skill sets. And so, and without getting into too many specifics, but for example, SCAN has the ability to work with, if the environment was doing an investigation, for example, that involved undercover operators and things like that, there's a way to use SCAN to help provide assistance to that. So, or if there was a need for traffic enforcement, we could use Highway Patrol. In fact, we saw it recently with the border issues, where we saw Highway Patrol actually going down and assisting RCMP and using their specific skill sets, heavy trucks, and the ability to look at for infractions and things like that on those heavy trucks, that RCMP members just didn't have that skill set. And it's been a long time since they've been trained in those kind of skill sets, but that's the advantage. That's a practical example of how we could leverage those resources in the longer run. I think the other part is of course communication and sharing of information. When all of these entities are now combined, and this spreads across not just the PPS, but the whole division, the whole division of Policing and Community Safety Services, is the ability to share that information back and forth. So sometimes that's officer safety information, and I think people are very familiar with why that's important, obviously. If there's a trend, a risk towards peace officers or police officers, that we can share that inside that organization. The other part is just sharing criminal intelligence, or maybe trends. For example, we have thefts that are going on in a rural area where you have an increase in that. We can share that information across a variety of different entities to be able to take that and become more effective in tackling that result or that issue. So that's, I know in a sort of a nutshell of a variety of different advantages of the PPS as an entity itself.
Thank you. I have a few questions that flow from that. The first is around the training, and you specifically mentioned highway traffic officers. Are they at the level now of, would you describe them as a level of training as COs, or what sort of training is everyone getting to get them to that level? So as you understand the ability to arrest, and going back to the analogy that the minister was making, obtain a breathalyzer sample, there's a lot of charter implications at play, and you want to make sure that those arrests, when made, will withstand any scrutiny in court. So I imagine there's a heightened level of training for that piece, as well as you mentioned, the firearms training, the active shooter training, the domestic violence, all of those sorts of things as well.
I do have an answer. So I think I'm going to have to break it down to a couple parts here because it's not just a straight response as to, and I think your question was, do we have the confidence in them to be able to carry out the duties that they would normally be expected to carry out? So their training, oh, did I reframe that wrong?
It's more just the training needed to do this work, not necessarily about.
So-
I don't want you to think that I don't have confidence in any of the staff. I just want to make sure that there's the adequate amount of training for them to be able to do their work.
So, and we're specifically referring to the highway patrol itself, or?
All of those under PPS who may be now eventually doing arrests and responding to situations that normally they wouldn't under their duties. It's probably the best way I can describe that.
So across the board, I believe that that everybody's trained to a proper level, have proper skill sets to conduct their core mandates. And those core mandates, of course, we're talking about 5 different types of entities with all different sort of levels of response. For example, CSOs under the PPS, they have a very distinct purpose, and their authority is restricted to certain activities. Conservation officers and highway patrol officers have very specific core mandates, and those are important core mandates that we need to make sure they maintain. And we've always, with regards to PPS, we're very clear in stating that those mandates will continue on, and that's very important as we move on. But the training level that a highway patrol officer or a conservation officer has is definitely adequate for the duties that they're expected to do in their core duties. But we've added certain level of training so they can do some more duties. But that said, I would not say they're at a level that they would take on, for example, they certainly wouldn't take on a homicide, for example, and they wouldn't take on a complex investigation that would be involving techniques and skill sets that you would acquire through in the policing world. So we wouldn't expect them to do that either. So one of the things that we've always looked at from the PPS point of view is somebody's not going to do something that they're not trained to do properly. And so that is why we had to go back and look at, when the PRT first started, we looked at the active shooter training, for example, because that wasn't something that was currently in their training curriculum. So we went back and we trained them in that. Another example of where we've added training, for example, is it's referred to pipeline course, which is a drug interdiction training. And so that the highway patrol officers that are on the highway, obviously they have access to people that will be traveling through our province, other provinces, in trafficking in narcotics, for example, or probably just dating myself, or controlled substance. But from that point of view, they've obtained more training to be able to do that more effectively. So they will meet those parameters and what the expectations are. When they deliver a report to Crown Council, they'll be able to do that with and making sure that it meets the standard that we would expect.
Thank you for that. One of the challenges I imagine would be when individuals respond to a call, you won't necessarily know that it's not going to be a homicide investigation or responding to a murder. You might think it's responding to a disturbance or an active shooter even until it's too late. So how is that addressed in the training or the protocols that are being put in place for these individuals?
Yes. Couple points, and I'll tackle the one with regards to your question, if they were to, say, come across a homicide, and that is absolutely a potential, right? So highway patrol officer or conservation officer could, or any law enforcement officer could end up coming across something that turns into a very serious incident, a homicide, or even aggravated assaults, things like that. But the officers, the peace officers that we have within PPS are trained in how to respond to that, in the sense that if they were to come across, let's say there was a call to a location and they come across and they find a body and there's an apparent homicide, they know how to secure that scene and what they need to do with that. They know that their role is, at that point, to protect the continuity of evidence and the scene itself. Therefore, and then through our dispatching network. So, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but our dispatching comes through SPSA, and we have the provincial 911 system, and so they would communicate and connect with our police partners, whether it be RCMP, Regina City, wherever the jurisdiction they're in, to have those people respond, the police respond, and then take over scene. And so very much, and of course that would become very important, critically important, when we got to a court environment where we need to have some recollection or some sort of description of how that scene was protected, so we know that the evidence there was maintained and proper. So, and I think that would probably cover the question that you had asked.
Thanks. So just to be clear, not every body within the PPS will be given the same powers, correct? And I'm thinking specifically with relation to scan investigators, for example, they won't have the ability to arrest, similar to highway traffic officers. Is that correct, or is there a plan to give them the power to arrest as well?
So I think just to tackle the question with scan directly and get that one sort of done, is that at this current time, they don't have that authority. They have the authority to arrest as any citizen would if they found somebody committing an indictable offense, but they don't have the power of arrest in the sense that I think what you were referring to is more of a 495 power of arrest. So that's not something they have today. And then one of the things for clarity is that I do see SCAN supporting other entities, as I've spoken about the leverage of the ability, but I don't see them as a proactive arresting unit. That wouldn't be their role. Their function right now, as you're very well aware, is the SCAN Act and the looking at, properties that are involving gangs and drugs and prostitution and child exploitation, those kind of things. Those are all specified in the Act itself. So from my point of view and our point of view is that would continue to be their primary mandate. So I don't foresee a great change there.
Okay. Just to be clear, there's no plan to provide them with any sort of arresting power. I'm not talking about citizen arrest power, but policing arrest power in the future.
No, not that I've anticipated yet, but
You mentioned that the highway traffic officers are now going through some training through the policing college. Can you provide some more information as to what is being provided to the policing college to deal with this enhancement of services that they're providing at this time?
If I'm understanding your question, you're looking at what training they receive at the police college is basically what you're asking.
Funding for the police college to provide this training.
Funding, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
To recap some of that highway traffic officer Saskatchewan Police College relationship training. When those officers were with the Ministry of Highways, we had a handshake agreement in place where one of their senior people was proficient in use of force training. So that individual provided training to the police college for all of the recruits that were in the class. In turn, we trained some highway traffic officers for, like I said, the Ministry of Highways. Now, since the police college, the budget for the police college falls under us, the administration of the police college falls under the Saskatchewan Police Commission, there's no charge back. We would train those officers, just like we did in the past, at a police officer training academy, and they receive that same basic training. At this point, I actually thought there was some in this class that's probably scheduled to graduate in the next month or so.
Yeah, maybe.
But right now, there aren't any officers in that class from highways.
Has there been an increase in funding for the police college this fiscal? No new money in budget this year specific to the operations of the police college. However, there was some funding put towards
an assessment of the training needs given the current PPS structure as well as our municipal police agencies going forward, what would be the requirements. So that RFP was sent out mid-January, I believe, and closed about 3 weeks ago. And again, that's in coordination with the ministry, but also the Police Commission.
And I think I have that OC in front of me. It's 69 of 2022, Buckingham Security Services funding agreement for $254,000, provide training needs assessment to the Sask Police College and PPS branch. Is that the one that you're talking about? And what exactly are they going to be doing?
Doing almost a best practice type of look at what we have in relation to what best practice is in training police officers, probably across the country. What we eventually want to make a determination of is there, or what would needed to be put in place to train all of our peace officers, special constables under one umbrella, including our municipal police agencies.
Including like Saskatoon Police and Regina Police.
That's right now, correct.
Okay. And you said that was an RFP process that was conducted to find the successful proponent?
Right.
Do you know how many organizations responded to that RFP?
At the end of the time, or the term of the RFP, I believe there was only one.
Okay, thank you. Minister, you mentioned that there is $1.5 million to the Sask crime suppression strategy, which includes the PPS that we've been speaking about. Could you provide a breakdown of what that money is for?
Wasn't wearing my glasses at the time. It's 15 million. Sorry. I'm going to be proven to be wrong again.
So I think we're
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So cover off the sort of the what we did discover is that the number for the Saskatchewan crime reduction strategy number for dollars is 13.636 million. So there was an error in the speaking note. From the point of view of what's in that, so there's 5 components. The first one is the GPS electronic monitoring, the START, which is the Saskatchewan Trafficking Response Team, an expansion of CRT, criminal reduction teams, and then the WEST, which is the Warrant Enforcement and Suppression Team, and then PPS, as we've been speaking about already.
Can you provide me the dollar figures for each of those 5 that you mentioned?
Can.
Thank you.
So for GPS, it's 1.346 million. For START, it's 6.403 million. For CRT, 3.195 million. For West, 1.598 million. And for PPS, 1.094 million.
Thank you. Now, breaking down further into PPS, could you provide some information as to what that money is for within PPS?
Same thing like today.
Hi, Ray Gallivan from the Policing and Community Safety Services. So the new money for the PPS includes funding for 7 new positions. That includes an executive director, some policy positions, and I don't recall what all 7 positions are doing, but a financial analyst, the new person will report to me. That's very important. So it's 7 new positions, and then there's accommodations money built in as well for office space and that kind of thing. As well, we're looking at potentially a new building to house the entire branch, because right now we're fit in about a space about as big as this. So to do a space analysis.
So how does the reporting structure work for the PPS? Because I understand and I assume that COs have a reporting structure, highway traffic officers have a reporting structure, but then there's also the ED of the PPS. Thank you for your answer. Sorry to kick you to the back again.
Always good to bring in the pinch hitter, right?
Yeah.
Closer. We'll see. The question was about the reporting structure. So PPS has a very distinct reporting structure. There's obviously very similar to how any law enforcement agency would be set up. We have an executive director. Well, ultimately, I guess it reports to me as the ADM. An executive director that would be responsible for daily operations and administration of the PPS. Below that, there's a variety of other executive directors that'll be the operational leads for each component inside of the PPS. PPS is broken into 3 distinct parts. The first part is the enforcement services, which is the conservation officers and the highway patrol group. There's a what I call Middle Earth, but it's a little bit of a Tolkien fan, I guess. But in this Middle Earth area, there is support services that would support the enforcement folks. So that would be things like the dog service for the conservation officers, or it would be the undercover operators that are with COs as well. It could be the professional standards group, things like that we see inside of the middle group. And then we get into the other side, which is the court security, prisoner transport, and investigative services, which includes, as you would guess from the name, court security and prisoner transport, but also the other entities that belong in my division from previously, before becoming PPS, so witness protection, the SIU, the SCAN group is still under that particular line. And that's basically the command or the structure of the, from a governance point of view, of inside of the PPS.
Okay. So, sorry if I didn't catch this, but would, for example, the head, and I'm sorry that I'm dumbing this down to my level, but for example, the head of the COs would report to the ED of the PPS? Is that how that structure works? Okay.
No, so and I was going to try and draw it in the air for you, but it's a little hard. But there is a chief superintendent that is in charge of the CO. So there, under that particular line, if you can imagine two branches, there's COs on one side, Highway Patrol within the enforcement section. They both have a chief that reports up to an executive director, an MCP 10 level. That person reports to the executive director that it is for the entire PPS. And then that executive director reports to me. Yeah.
That makes sense to me. With the visual, now I understand it. You can understand, Minister, that with the work that your ministry has done with enhancing policing in Saskatchewan and the creation of what was a PRT, and I'm making it sound like it's the next generation. We've already had that conversation, not the next generation, but what is now the PPS. In light of what we've seen in some other provinces, including Alberta, there has been some concern in policing organizations about where this is all going, in particular around the future of RCMP in Saskatchewan. So could the ministry provide some clarity as to what they see the role, what you see the role as, the role of the PPS being in relation to, for example, the role of the RCMP in this province?
Ready? Okay. In answer to your question and your query, the RCMP are the provincial policing service of this province, now and into the foreseeable future. I want to ask Rob to take that a little bit further in conversations and discussions that he has had.
Thank you, Minister. Absolutely glad you asked this question because it gives me a chance to speak about the relationship and the ability that we have to work with the RCMP in this province, with PPS being part of that. Myself, I've had direct conversations with the commanding officer of the RCMP here in the division, the criminal operations officer in the division for the RCMP, about talking about the opportunities that we can discover and look at where we can work together throughout this province. Certainly, we already have a relationship with the RCMP, no secret there, but there's certainly things that we are looking at is how we can have our officers in PPS and the RCMP better integrated. That's not just restricted to just the RCMP. I mean, we would look at all the police services and maybe other law enforcement agencies as opportunities present themselves. But certainly, this is going to be a very collaborative, a very cooperative approach to how we do this. The PPS is not a replacement for the RCMP. It's not a replacement for any provincial police service. As Minister has said, the RCMP is the police service for this province, the provincial police service for the foreseeable future. In fact, there's 10 years left on the contract. So that, to me, is not an issue that we're going to be dealing with anytime shortly. But I really do look forward to the opportunities where we can enhance things like rural visibility with law enforcement. So for years, people have talked about the need to have more rural visible presence, and this is an opportunity to do that. We also have the ability and the opportunities to now tackle impaired driving to a larger degree. We can look at drug trafficking. We can look at human trafficking. We can look at, we've also now got these initiatives like START and WEST, which are actually become very, although they're just really being built, they've already become effective. WEST has already seen results with arrests of people that are quite dangerous to society. START is we've already taken drugs and guns off the street. So these things, I'm very happy and proud to talk about these and really look forward to those opportunities in the future. What I can tell you, though, is the RCMP has been very receptive of that as well. And not to get too much into the minutiae of things, but we're also looking at how we can even share locations, for example, get access to buildings so we can better process if we catch impaired drivers, we can take them in there and we can get access to those buildings and work with the police service, whichever the RCMP or whatever jurisdiction that might be. But these are certainly positive benefits, and maybe something I should have spoke about earlier when we were talking about the benefits of PPS, but certainly that ability to really leverage that relationship, interoperability, just the ability to provide a better public safety service to the province.
Thank you for that, and I do very much appreciate the clarity and the opportunity for you to put that on the record. I very much appreciate that. I understand that many in policing, like you had mentioned, see the two new teams, West and Start, as a positive step forward, that more resources is always a good thing. One of the challenges, and I'm wondering if it's an actual challenge or if it was just a perception that had been raised to me, was on recruitment of these new positions and being able to fill the new positions. As we know, there is a challenge within the RCMP right now of recruitment and retention. So I'm wondering if you can speak to that a bit in terms of the West and the START team, if there's been any challenges with that.
right, very timely question. As you will probably be aware, and I think you were at SUMA when Assistant Commissioner Blackmore, Rhonda Blackmore, had actually spoke about this. And yes, I think she acknowledged the fact that there's challenges in recruitment within the policing world, not necessarily just the RCMP, but in policing in general. And there's probably lots of reasons for that. I think from the point of view of the units, and as Assistant Commissioner Blackmore had mentioned, is they are strategically looking at how they can fill those units, and not in an attempt not to deplete from any one area too much, but to make sure that those new units get when they can move people over, and it makes reasonable sense, and then it's not going to impact negatively on operations, that she would do that. I think it's also important, I mentioned that in the START unit itself, 6 of those positions are actually municipal police officer positions too. So their goal is to work in the larger picture and liaise with the START teams that are strategically located across the province, and not only act as liaison, but also I think it's safe to assume that most people are aware that drugs come into the province, people are trafficked, or guns are trafficked, illegal guns are trafficked into the province, and they go in. They do sometimes make their way to those cities. So it was important that we had some element of START that also resided in the municipal policing boundaries of, and in our case, it's PA, Saskatoon, and Regina that got those positions. I think, generally speaking, and one more comment on the staffing. I know the RCMP, has had challenges with depot, with COVID, and the lack of ability to put cadets through. We've done fairly well in the province, but obviously we would desire more. But I'm confident the RCMP is going to work on that and be able to accomplish that as time goes on, and hopefully COVID, stays very neutral and we can move ahead.
So just so I understand, the 2 new units are operational, but they're not fully staffed yet at this time. Can you provide information as to what the staffing complement is now? What vacancies are left to be filled?
Okay. That's one I'll have to get back to you on. I just don't have those in front of me today.
Table it with the committee when as soon as possible. That would be fantastic. Thank you. Now, I wasn't going to mention it, but the minister, you brought this up, Minister. You indicated that there is a legislative security unit that's a part of the PPS. Can you provide any information as to how much money is being attached to this unit? I didn't open it.
sentencing one. C-21 is the firearms. C-22. I never know which federal bill. Yeah, C-22 is the sentencing one. That's where they reduce the sentence. Mandatory minimums, yeah. Got friends everywhere, Mr. Chair. Can I put any money up? No, as soon as there's a beard, it's extra power. It's all due to your poor life choices. That's why you accumulate so many friends.
Just in reply to your question, Ms. Sauer, the initial budget allocation for the security unit was placed on a line item with PPS as more of a placeholder than anything. The actual PPS group that started last week does not structurally have that component of ledge security right now, as the whole Bill 70 is still in that debate stage. Did you want the breakdown of the money?
Is there a breakdown of money? If so, yes, please.
Okay, so the 1.5 million is allocated towards the 11 FTEs, and there was also, I believe, another 440 going to accommodation and capital type of costs.
And that's for specifically the legislative security unit? So the 11 FTEs are for the legislative security unit?
That's correct.
And what will be the requirements of those FTEs
The,
to be?
well,
Skills? What skills is that?
I don't need specific names, but yeah, what skills, what would, yeah, with their qualifications? I mean, unless you have names, I would love to get those on the record, but.
are to be determined. You know, with the challenges of putting forward a proposal that we think might address the needs of the people that work in this building and the people that visit this building and the security of this building, that was a number that we came up with. It, as you could probably make the connection, that there's currently money being provided to a security unit in the building. And we wouldn't expect there to be an overlap of those funds.
Okay. Has there been any conversation as to what the training requirements will be for those 11 FTEs?
There would obviously be a fundamental security training that would be expected. However, there's also occupations such as retired police officers that might bring that previous experience to that role. And until we actually get down the road of doing a proper risk assessment and security assessment for the building, determining what those resources are looking like in relation to not only numbers but also the hard security items that could be needed for the building, we're unable to, put a definitive, capture around that.
So just so that I understand, you mentioned this was put in the budget. There really isn't any concrete plans for what this will look like at this time. Is that correct, or have plans already been made?
when we were given this scenario, basically, we looked at some different models. And as with the information that we had and the experience that we had and some of the best case scenarios for this type of security unit, we fell within this 11 FTEs with a certain dollar figure that takes into consideration some of the components that are already in place within the security unit as it currently exists. The expectation going forward is one that would, as Rob mentioned on the PPS side and different policing agencies, it will be collaborative as well. So we would expect to have discussions with the Board of Internal Economy, with the Speaker, with the current Sergeant at Arms, and make a informed decision as to what we really need for building security and safety of individuals working in the building.
Okay. I don't want to get spicy tonight. It's hot in this room enough already, and we can save those conversations for a later date if the bill goes to committee. Hopefully it never does, but if it does, then we can have some of the conversations that I want to get into based on what you had just said, Mr. Larson, but I'm going to table that for now. I do want to ask one more question about this, though. The individuals who are currently providing security services in this building, has there been any consideration by the ministry to fold them in as a part of these potentially 11 FTEs in this new legislative security unit, should that legislative security unit come to exist in the future?
More than happy to fill the time. I'm secretly hoping that you do pose Mr. Freeberg a few questions. Your favorite saying, Mr. Chair, is generally I withdraw my motion.
I think you apologized twice as a speaker, didn't you? I think you did.
It's probably brave the offices have answered.
Don't blame the mic. It's a poor mechanic blames his tools.
I gotta blame someone. I always blame my speech.
Not to rub it in, but twice.
Twice.
Don't copy these fast.
Facts and logic do not
Facts and
belong.
logic are not allowed.
Now this new speaker, if he doesn't, he's not quite as flashy as our old speaker was. It's because
That looks good.
Shakespeare's all the time. You can turn on and off the mic thanks to you. You don't have to hear it. So it's really the sacrifice you made.
You know, Doc, Dan tried to make his mark and he never really got into the history books, but you did.
I'm all over the history.
At the stage we are at with this initiative, and very preliminary, as you know, we don't currently expect there to be any job losses. We're looking at a group of 11 people, and we'll have to see how this rolls out over the next weeks to a month.
Thank you for that. I'll maybe table this conversation for now. Hopefully, we won't ever have this conversation at a future bill committee. I still hold out hope that that will happen, that Bill 70 will be scrapped. But if it isn't, then we'll have this conversation at a later date. Being cognizant of the time, I want to ask a bit about PAC teams. I've heard from those in policing about very much positive feedback about the success of PAC teams. Could you provide any information as to whether or not there has been an increase in funding in this budget for that program?
You and Mr. Witherspoon are very cagey. I give you credit. Very good. He tried a similar thing.
Did he? Did he?
Yeah, I think it was like what was our very first committee meeting.
Oh, really? Well, he's good at what he does, what can I say?
He was not that good.
Okay.
I said he attempted.
How am I doing? Am I doing better? No?
A little more charming.
Okay, yeah.
It's still a dead end alley. That's fine.
You guys will have to sit in that committee. You realize that. It's the IAJ committee.
Oh, I look forward to it.
So with regards to PACT, so in this budget, there wasn't any increase for PACT units. However, I would highlight that there is a program that is going on right now with the RCMP Division Operational Communication Center, where there was PACT, or a PACT-like model, introduced into the dock, as they call it. What that does is puts psychiatric nurses into the RCMP dispatch center, so they can, for example, if you had a call where somebody was in a state of crisis, mental health issue, that the police officers that are calling into the dock can now be linked to a psychiatric nurse that resides in that communication center, who then can provide guidance and perhaps actions that they can take with these individuals that they're dealing with. It's actually based on a model that came out of England, which worked very well there. And obviously, so the attending police officers then have the ability to have professional guidance as how they can interact with this person, what they need to do, what they shouldn't do so they don't trigger a negative reaction. They can also identify perhaps certain issues, for example, excited delirium and things like that. So this is the advantage of this program. Apparently it's working well. That's what I've been told. So, and I think it's being well received by the field as well.
I imagine it would be. Why was there a decision not to expand the PACT program this budget cycle?
So with regards to funding, this year we were able to obtain funding to increase ICE. However, weren't able to get funding for PACT. We're under right now doing a process of evaluation and looking at where we could find other areas to expand PACT to and look for budget asks to get more money for PACT. We believe it's a very effective program. It's the evaluation that's been done has shown it to be extremely effective and also well received by not only the public but the policing folks as well. So we definitely believe in it. We do have, though, and I think it's important to acknowledge that it's a partnership with health. So there's two entities that we have to work together and trying to work towards getting this additional funding. But that's a process we're working through in this year, and hopefully I'll have something to talk about for next year.
Hopefully, thank you, and thank you for that advocacy. I understand it's a partnership with health. I'll make sure that my colleague hassles the Ministry for Health just as much as I hassle the Ministry for Corrections for that important work. Do you want to talk about the gang reduction strategy a little bit before we move on to, hopefully I could get some of the other folks that are behind you on some other questions that I have, but let's talk a bit about the gang reduction strategy. You were speaking a bit about community intervention and some referrals that were made. I'm wondering if you can provide some further information.
Podium. Drew Wilby, Community Engagement. So the community intervention model has been up and running since January of 2020. We have two delivery partners. One is Straight Up in Saskatoon and North. The other is Ritzis delivering the program in Regina and South. Straight Up receives $750,000 a year. Ritzis $375,000. So far, 273 gang-affiliated individuals have been referred to the SIM program, Community Intervention Model Program, since January of 2020. There's currently 119 clients actively participating in programming across the province. I think as we talked before, but there's three phases of the community intervention model. Phase one is really that initial outreach. Phase two starts to wrap program and support around, and phase three is where we start to pull back on how much intervention is done and really that full reintegration once gang life has been left. And so currently Straight Up has 67 clients in phase one, 26 in phase two, and 0 in phase three. Ritzis has 12 in phase one, 9 in phase two, and 5 in phase three.
Moving forward, I'm just wondering about the life cycle of this program. Is there an intention that the funding for these two organizations will remain essentially as permanent as provincial funding is, but as permanent as possible, or is this a program with a time frame on it?
At this point, this is funded through the federal government's money that came as part of their I can't say the word, Guns and Gangs Violence Action Fund. We are conducting it comes out as gungs. We are, whatever that is, we are conducting an evaluation in the province. We've signed a contract with the Center for Forensic Behavioral Science and Justice Studies at the U of S for $96,000. They'll conduct a study and evaluation on it for us this year. That coupled with the DATSU work as well as the SIG initiative and the prosecution pieces as well, which make up the pillars of the entire gang violence reduction strategy. We understand Public Safety Canada is doing an evaluation as well, and we are pushing them as hard as we possibly can to try to get some commitment of funding in out years for this. If not, of course, we'll look at this provincially and see where we go. This is the last funded year from the feds for the program.
Right. Sorry, I did know that this was federal dollars, but completely forgot. And I'm happy to hear that that there is some work hoping in pushing the feds to continue on with that funding. But it sounds like, based on what you said, that if the feds decide not to fund this into the future, that the province will be looking into potentially funding this. Is that correct?
Yeah, depending on what the evaluation shows, from anecdotally and where we are, and in particular the work of Straight Up across the north. And they're in communities like Onion Lake, which of course is the home of the West Side Outlaws, doing significant work in there. They're into Prince Albert and the West Side Flats area, North Battleford, and then trying to reach the northeast as well, and doing some pretty significant work at the front end, which of course is that intervention pillar for us. So depending on that evaluation, if it is successful, we would look to come back if the feds won't fund it, probably through a provincial budget ask. But of course, there's still a few I's to dot and T's to cross before then. And again, any help on the Public Safety Canada front would be very beneficial for us.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for that update. Oh, yeah, for sure.
I just wanted to be able to contribute a little bit to that as well, because SIG is another part of that GVRS, and I think it's something I'd like to highlight as well. Certainly, the SIG program it's been in place since the start of the GVRS is proving to be a worthwhile way of sharing that criminal intelligence. And if you remember back to the conversation I had with PPS and the sharing of information, SIG is another component of not PPS, but in the division, in my policing division, where we bring in partners and from all different kinds of law enforcement and be able to exchange that information appropriately, but within the group of law enforcement, providing better intel on trends of how drug trafficking is going on, illegal firearms trafficking, the issues and it also involves components of the correction system. So there's a link to, and I know you're aware of this, but there's a link between what happens inside corrections in the facilities and what happens on the street. And obviously, there's a continuing line of business there. So I think it's important to recognize in the GVRS, that became a critical component as well. And GVRS has multiple parts to it, pillars in it. But certainly, as we go forward, and I look forward to, obviously, the federal government continue the funding here, but it certainly is a worthwhile program and part of the GVRS. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I'd like to ask a few questions of the SAS Public Safety Agency, if possible. SPSA. Losing the acronyms.
I know, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Could you provide a breakdown of the budget for this fiscal?
Teresa Florizone, Vice President, Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency. So the breakdown of the budget for SPSA is made up of about $2.5 million, and that's the increase. This $2.5 million is made up of about $200,000 in regards to the emergency preparedness and fire safety public education, $100,000 for the increase in First Nations and community evacuation planning, $196,000 for disaster mitigation adaptation fund projects. So those are the mitigation projects in regards to the federal program that we have that are for the clearings of the brush where we protect the communities. And about $1.937 million for the centralized costs and support for the ITD, the accommodations and collective bargaining for just the CBA's increases that we have for the agency that we belong to, SGEU. And a $200,000 decrease in regards to visual identity for the areas such as the uniforms, the vehicles, and signage that we have on the vehicles, because last year we did have the increase that we actually had public promotion and the ability to give us some recognition of who SPSA is, Saskatchewan Public Safety.
I didn't hear anything with respect to COVID. Did I miss that, or are there?
To our base budget for Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency, the agency does not have COVID dollars per se over the base budget. If there is any need for COVID costs, that would be over and above the base budget, and we would go back for supplementary estimates because we anticipate COVID is going to be status quo of our base budget.
Okay, is the COVID response still flowing through the SPSA?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Because I didn't hear anything in the breakdown of the budget with respect to COVID, and I'm just wondering whether or not, I thought that the COVID response was still being operationalized out of the SPSA, and whether or not that was correct.
No, the PEOC was, demobilized at the end of February or into mid-March, I guess. We are still involved, but not, it's more just in regards to the rapid test kits, coordinating the distribution of that. Prior to that, absolutely, we had the PEOC, and SPSA was involved with helping coordinate activities between SHA, Ministry of Health, and ourselves, but that has been discontinued, so there has been no dollars asked in our base budget.
Why was that decision made?
The decision for...
To disband the PEOC?
Well, part of the PEOC process is it's a way of managing an incident. And it's about, once it gets down to almost business as usual, living with COVID, it is no longer an emergency or requires that level of coordination through an incident command system, which is a very structured process. It becomes more as business as usual. Not saying that if something happens in the next months, years, that this cannot be reactivated, because again, it is a proven system that is available and can be literally enacted within about 48 hours or less, depending on the severity of it.
What was the trigger that originally centralized the COVID response to PEOC?
PEOC has always been activated, just right back from the start in March of 2020. We always had a role to play in regards to assisting health or assisting SHA, assisting communities, coordinating activities across SPSA, across governments, sharing information through our intelligence unit, across government agencies, crowns, ensuring that we had a good understanding of the situation. When the fourth wave hit in the fall, it was felt that a centralized, a unified command system would be a better approach, or an opportunity to bring all of the entities under one command system. And the whole idea of that was to, coordinate and flow information quickly, confirm information, and allow for faster decision-making, and bringing resources in from, again, across government, across SPSA, SHA, Ministry of Health, where and when needed. So again, it's utilizing that system to streamline the dealing of whatever that issue is, and in this case, it was COVID.
And just to reiterate what you had already said, should it need to be restarted again, that could be done within 48 hours?
Or less. I mean, literally, the structure is there, the system is there. It's really a plug and play. I mean, we have an org chart. All we need to do is identify the people that have those special skill sets and put them in there, and we're up and running. So literally, we could be up even faster than that.
And again, just to reiterate, so the only work the SPSA is doing right now with respect to COVID is the distribution of the rapid tests?
That is correct. We still have some PPE in stock, and we would supply it if requested, but that's not our primary. Right now, it's just the rapid test kits that are, of course, moving across the province to well over 600 distribution points.
Could you provide some more information about the rapid test distribution rollout?
Okay, in basically November of 2021, again, part of the PEOC process was to assist with taking some pressure off of SHA, Ministry of Health. And so as part of that, we ended up taking over about 75% of the Test to Protect program. And what that is distribution of the rapid test kits throughout the province. So we have a unit that does the logistics, coordinates with the distribution points, and again, and built that distribution network. In all fairness, started with libraries, started with chambers of commerce, fire departments, branched out to a number of private businesses, including the co-ops, which was a phenomenal, I guess I'll call it a win, because they reached into so many small communities. And then through that, we developed I guess a pull system. So once we identified a distribution point based on population, based on a number of factors, rapid test kits were sent out to those distribution points, and with the instruction of, when you get low, call our number, email us at SPSA, and we would send out another number of rapid test kits as long as they were available. So that's how that worked. To date, we have rolled out through SHA internal 4.281 million kits. NITHA and ISC, we rolled out 2.739 million kits. Schools, 2.468 million. Congregate living, 633,000, just over 633,000. Law enforcement and fire departments, we supplied them with 191,600. EMS, just about 16,000. Through the Test to Protect program, just under 300,000, and then public distribution points, those over 600 community sites, 8.68 and 270. 8,680,275 kits went out to the public distribution site. Part of that process of reporting it up, of course, is also reaching out every couple of weeks to the different distribution sites and building, what that stock picture is. And our crew did a phenomenal job in keeping a running tab of our hotspots and areas that needed the rapid test kits to be deployed. So,
Thank you. That's a lot of kits. Have there been any issues with accessibility or pressure points any times when there's been a depletion and you weren't able to fill any of the requests?
No, we have not been able to, again, thanks to the federal, supply, we've been able to ask for about 4.3 million a month up until, I guess it would be March. And for the most part, that was supplied. Sometimes a little bit, delayed a couple weeks, like a lot of supply issues are now. But no, we were always able to, and again, thanks to our crew being able to juggle and hit priorities, move stuff internally, we were always able to supply when somebody made a request.
Thank you. That's a lot of distribution points and a lot of kits, so a lot of work for your staff. So thank you for all of that continued work. Cognizant of the time, I'm going to ask a few questions about correction facilities again. Thank you for your responses, Mr. Pritchard. I would be remiss if we didn't get an estimates where I didn't ask for point-in-time counts for the facilities. So if that could be provided, that would be great.
Heather Scriver. So the adult custody facility capacity counts. Regina Correctional Center, this is as of today. At Regina Correctional Center, there is a count of 731. 362 are sentenced, and 369 are remanded. So for remanded capacity, that's 51%. Saskatchewan Hospital, North Battleford, there's 10 male offenders and 7 female, for a total count of 17. 9 of those are sentenced and 8 are remanded. Prince Albert Correctional Center, 474 males, 200 sentenced and 274 are remanded for a percentage of 58%. If we go down to Pine Grove Correctional Center, we have 184 females in there, 65 are sentenced, 120 or 65% are remanded. Saskatoon Correctional Center, we have 533 males, and in there we also have the reintegration unit, the female reintegration unit with 12 offenders in there. So the total count for Saskatoon Correctional Center as an entity is 546, 209 are sentenced, 337 are remanded, which is 63% remanded.
Thank you for that. This is the part of the night where I start panicking with time and start lightning around asking questions that I forgot to ask. And you reminded me that I wanted to ask some questions about Sask Hospital, North Battleford, the corrections side. Could you provide some information as to how many beds are currently open on the custody side of Sask Hospital?
Currently 17, how many beds are open out of the 48?
48 beds are available, are open out of, isn't it 90 some that
It's 96.
96, okay.
Right.
So 48 out of a total of 96 beds are open.
Right.
How many are currently being utilized out of the 48?
17.
Okay. I'm surprised that number is so low. Could you provide an explanation for why that would be?
As I explained last year at estimates too, it has to do with the recruitment of the psychiatrists. Our offenders can only be admitted to the hospital under psychiatrist's approval. So there is the process is there for that. However, they're still recruiting psychiatrists to admit offenders to Sask Hospital. There's nursing issues there as well. So it's staffing.
From what I understand, last time we spoke about this, the reason why there are only 48 of the 96 beds open is because of staffing challenges and recruitment challenges with nursing. Now, the reason why there are only 17 offenders in the 48 beds are because of the bottleneck with having a psychiatric referral.
Hi, yes, you are correct. That is the reason why the numbers are low at SHMB in the correction side of the facility. It has to do with staffing challenges. And I mean, this question was asked also of the Ministry of Health, and it's right across Canada. Healthcare staff, there's challenges with recruitment of healthcare staff. Our admissions to SHMB on the secure side occur once per week. And again, with the shortage of psychiatrists to do that admission process, that resource is stretched.
I'm thinking specifically about a news article that came out this morning about a specific instance where there is an individual in custody right now who has been ordered, who's court ordered to go to Sask Hospital, who's currently sitting in a medical unit in one of our correctional facilities, waiting to get there to get that treatment. So, what's the issue here? Why are folks like this individual having to sit in a medical unit in a correctional facility when they should be at Sask Hospital, which is what I understand the whole point of the build of Sask Hospital was to be?
Yeah, the Sask Hospital was indeed built or redone, intended in a large way to look after offenders that are, whether on remand or sentenced, experiencing mental health issues, challenges, crisis. With respect to this type of situation that was highlighted today, offenders that have court-ordered mental health assessments are held in our care until health professionals at SHNB can complete the assessment. After the assessment, the individual will be transferred back into our care and will continue through the justice process. You know, as we were talking about, you know, the issue of recruitment and retention, I know that Heather Scriver spoke to that, the challenges with respect to healthcare workers. And we're indeed, you know, I mean, we feel that right across the board here. And, you know, when you're, they're only doing assessments for offenders once a week, it is indeed going to leave us wanting, for sure. And, you know, this is something that we have to, as a government, work our way through with strategies to try and improve it. And it certainly isn't optimum. Heather has something to say.
Just further on that, so there's a misconception that the forensic unit, where these court-ordered assessments go, these court-ordered clients go for their assessment, the forensic unit is not part of the 96 beds. So that's run by the SHA, not corrections and policing.
Do you know what the current wait list is for corrections side inmates to access the beds that are available at Sask Hospital? Or to get an evaluation by a psychiatrist, I suppose.
Hi. We have everything but the response to your question.
Tabling that information at a later date? Thank you. I think the chair is starting to give me the hook, so I will take this opportunity to thank you, Minister, for answering my questions, and especially to your officials for being here this evening. Thank you for your thoughtful responses to all of my questions. My apologies if I never got to you this evening. I always feel horrible when you have to sit in estimates and I never even get to asking you a question. Please know that I very much appreciate and thank you for all of the work that you do, you and all of your staff team within the ministry. So thank you for the opportunity to ask some questions this evening. Thank you to you, Mr. Chair, as well as the dutiful committee of IHA. It's always a pleasure to sit with you, as well as the committee staff at Hansard and Ledge Services and those security folks keeping us safe out there. Thank you.
I think it's me. So, as we said, we haven't reached our agreed upon time and consideration.
Closing comments.
Yeah, I'm there, coming up. Big finish. Okay, well, we're going to, anyways, Minister Tell, why don't you thank everybody and for closing comments, and then I'll say my last spiel. Go.
Okay, all right, all right. I too want to thank the committee and the beautiful committee, apparently, the absolutely stunning committee. And of course, you and Mr. Chair, and all of these people back here. This province is indeed very, very fortunate. And I mean, and these two too. I don't want to ever think that they are being excluded. On behalf of the people of the province, I certainly want to express my gratitude and my appreciation. They can, every one of them can be counted on, and are diligent in doing their job and serving the people of the province. And I'm very proud to work with all of them. And not you, okay. But yes, and so I'm gonna leave it at that. Everybody, even though there were no questions of any of the people here, yeah, see, I'm getting a wind up. It doesn't mean that they all haven't had input into what happened here tonight. So, thank you.
Bless you.
Bless you. Yeah, yeah, you need it. So, anyway, I'm finished.
All right, well, thank you, Minister. And again, I'd like to thank you, Minister. I'd like to thank the officials, Ms. Saar. I'd like to thank you, the committee, and of course, Hansard. And that concludes our business for today. I'd ask a member to move a motion of adjournment. Mr. Graywall has moved. All agreed? Carried. This committee stands adjourned until 3:15 tomorrow.